Good morning. So today we shall continue with the problem of motion of compact binary systems. So we shall just consider systems of two compact objects that are either black holes or neutron stars, which will move onto quasi-Keplerian orbits around their common center of mass, and we shall have two masses M1 and M2, and in principle the two compact objects, black holes or neutron stars, should have also some spins, and maybe later this week we shall discuss the problem of the spins of compact objects, their intrinsic rotation or just classical angular momentum. But for this lecture today, we shall neglect the spins of the object and therefore describe them by only two mass parameters, M1 and M2. So the objects follow some trajectories in some coordinate systems that has been fixed. So I will have some coordinate system X and coordinate time X naught, which will be CT. And we shall use the so-called harmonic coordinate system to describe the motion of these objects. So we shall have two velocities. That will be the ordinary velocities, dy y1 over t, where y1 will be the position of the two objects. I am using ordinary, larger, bigger, okay. So the positions of the two objects will be denoted y1, y2, and there will be also acceleration of the object, say A, where A will be 1 or 2, which would be the ordinary derivative of the object with respect to ordinary coordinate time. I am using here to describe the motion of the object some Newtonian-like quantities, ordinary velocities, position, acceleration, with respect to ordinary time, and this is done in a particular coordinate system that we shall define together. And this is the appropriate treatment for working out the problem of the equations of motion in the PN approximation. So we shall consider the PN equations of motion in GR of compact binary systems. So I will first define for you a proper action for the motion of the two compact objects. An action, that is an action principle, which would be an action that is the time integral of a Lagrangian, and we shall have this Lagrangian, which depends on the positions and velocities and perhaps accelerations of the bodies, and by varying the action, we shall get the equations of motion, that is how the acceleration of a given body is given as some functional of the position and velocities of all the bodies. Sorry, so I will write it like that. So this is the equations of motion. So, in order to define this action, we shall first define what is called the gauge fixed Einstein-Hilbert action in GR. Gauge fixed because we shall fix the gauge, that is, we shall fix actually a coordinate system, and once this is fixed, we shall describe the motion entirely in this coordinate system. So we have seen yesterday the Einstein-Hilbert action of general relativity, which is just given by the integral of the scalar curvature of space-time. And there will be also the matter action, which will depend on the positions and velocities of the bodies, and also the metric. Remind that the Ricci scalar is a functional of the metric, the derivative of the metric, and the second derivatives of the metric. And we shall first rewrite this action in an equivalent form, modulo total divergence, which involves only the metric and the derivative of the metric, but not the second derivative of the metric. This new form of the action is extremely well known. It was introduced by Landau and Lifshitz in their famous book on theory of fields. And I will do that now, just reminding the expression of the scalar curvature as a function of the Christoffel symbols. So let me do the calculation for you. We have R is the trace of the Ricci curvature, which is given in terms of the Christoffel symbols by 4 terms. There are terms d gamma that are derivative of the Christoffel symbol, plus terms that are gamma quadratic product of these Christoffel symbols. And I will not write fully the indices for you. I think this should be very simple for you, and you can do that as an exercise for yourself this afternoon, for instance. And what you do is that you modify this Lagrange density by adding up a total divergence, which will not affect the equations of motion. When you vary the action, the total divergence are integrated terms that do not affect the dynamics derived from the action. So what you do is that you perform an integration by part, an operation by part, of these two derivatives, and then you will have some terms like square root, the derivative of square root of minus g, the covariant contravariant component of the metric tensor, that you can rewrite as an expression in terms of gamma function, gamma symbol. So you re-express the derivative of the metric in terms of Christoffel symbols. And you ignore the total divergence, which will not change the Lagrangian dynamics. And therefore, what you get is the Einstein-Hilbert action in the Landau-Lifshitz form, which depends only on the metric and the derivative of the metric, but not on the second derivatives of the metric, since it will be just linear in the Christoffel symbols. So this form is very interesting for practical calculations of the equations of motion in post-Newtonian theory, as we shall see. And this form is just given by the product of gamma terms. And I will add the correct indices here. Mu lambda, mu nu, sorry, rho lambda lambda, and rho plus still the matter action. We next pose an object which is sometimes called the Gothic metric. Which is given by g mu nu is equal to square root of minus g. It's a tensor density, and the inverse of that metric is just 1 over square root of minus g, the covariant derivative, the covariant component of the metric. Yes? Yes. So the second derivative of the metric appears just in the form of can be rewritten, and they are contained only in a total divergence that you can ignore. If you vary the total divergence, it will be 0 in the variation and does not affect the equations of motion. Yes. Yes, exactly, absolutely. This is absolutely crucial. This is standard in Lagrangian dynamics. You have, okay. So then the action is given by, in terms of this variable, by minus 1 over 64 pi, an integral over d4x, and sorry, this is here d4x, this is the action, of some terms. I will not write completely them, but there will be some terms which depends on the derivative of the metric. There are quadratic in the derivative of this Gothic metric. So lambda tau, there will be mu nu here, rho sigma, and there will be here the metric which appears. Mu rho, mu sigma, minus 1/2 of mu nu rho sigma. And there is another term sigma rho plus the matter action. So I have written here the full Einstein-Hilbert action in this variable, and this is completely explicit in terms of this particular metric, and actually this is full GR, which is given by this action, which is relatively simple. Yes? Ah, yes, sorry. Yeah, okay. Shall I rewrite this with all the indices? Okay. No, I think this is not so important for the rest of the course. And now we shall impose a gauge condition, that is, we shall add a term to the action in order to fix the coordinate system. We choose harmonic coordinates, or de Donder coordinates, or de Donder coordinates that are defined by the ordinary divergence of the Gothic metric is 0. This is the gauge condition, which can be written equivalently as square root of minus g of gamma, which is equivalent to gamma mu is 0, where gamma mu is the contraction of the Christoffel symbol with the metric. Since we have the relation that square root of minus g gamma mu is minus d nu of the divergence of that Gothic metric. The gauge fixed term will be a term that is to be added to the action of GR, and this gauge fixed term is very simple. It can be written in terms of this contracted Christoffel symbol, and I will write it here. So we shall have now the gauge fixed action, where I am adding just this term, minus 1/2 of g mu nu, gamma mu, gamma nu. Or, in this completely explicit form, the gauge fixing term that I am adding will just be a term modifying the last term here, which will be, and I am using now this form of I am using this relation to rewrite the gauge fixing term, and this will be just given by the divergence of the Gothic metric plus the matter action. This will be again the gauge fixed term. And the effect of this gauge fixing term is to, when we vary now the action, okay, then automatically we obtain the so-called relaxed Einstein field equations that are directly the Einstein field equations that have been reduced or relaxed by the harmonic gauge condition. And this is very interesting because this form of the Einstein field equations is very nice. It is just in the form of some hyperbolic-like system of equations involving a wave operator, and in the right-hand side of which you have a source term which depends only on the metric and the derivative of the metric. So we obtain the Einstein field equations as a wave operator acting defined by means of the metric and acting on the metric itself. And in the right-hand side, there will be a matter term defined from the stress energy tensor of my matter fields. And then there will be many nonlinear terms, but which depends on the metric and the derivative of the metric. And in this form, the Einstein field equations form a well-posed problem in the sense that you can specify the solution of the equations at some initial instant, or rather you can specify initial conditions on some space-like hypersurface, and given these initial conditions, with this equation you can evolve these initial conditions in order to get a full, complete solution of the field equation for a complete space-time solution of these equations. So this is a well-posed formulation of the Einstein field equations. If we assume that we consider a perturbation of the Minkowski metric, we shall pose that the Gothic metric is given by eta mu nu plus some h mu nu with h mu nu much less than 1. Then the equations can be rewritten as ordinary flat wave equations that are given by the matter term defined with the stress energy tensor of your matter fields, plus now a nonlinear source term. But you see, in order to define the box operator is a flat D'Alembertian operator, which is defined with respect to the Minkowski flat background. So this is box operator with respect to the Minkowski metric. You have to introduce the box operator here from that operator in the left-hand side, and you have to take one of the terms and put it on the right-hand side, and therefore now the right-hand side will depend on the field, the derivative of the field, and there will be also some term again that depend on the second derivative of the field. So of course the mathematician will prefer certainly this form of the equation in which you have a nice hyperbolic-like operator on the left-hand side and just on the right-hand side, which can be specified uniquely by initial conditions, since it depends only on the metric and the first derivative of the metric. But for us, it is better to consider a wave operator, very simple, since we know how to integrate such equations. And on the right-hand side, there will be some terms that are dependent on the second derivative of h, but these terms will be small in the approximation, since this object will be at least quadratic in h and its derivatives. Okay. So now we have the complete formalism in order to define the Fokker action, yes? Well, it depends. If you have a source that is weakly gravitating, slow motion source and so on, so the metric will be valid also inside the source. This expansion will be valid also inside the source. Yeah. So now, yes. Yes. Yes, later. Just there is a big difference between this formalism, which is valid for any metric. It will be valid close to black holes. It will be valid for a cosmological spacetime, for non-asymptotically flat spacetime. And from now on, I will assume that really you have a perturbation of the Minkowski metric. So I totally agree with you. This is completely general, and then we make an assumption for post-Newtonian approximations starting with the Minkowski metric. So now we shall define the so-called Fokker action of a system of point particles. Well, since I want to define the Fokker action, I will define it directly from that action. So I introduce this formalism in order to show, and also the formalism is.
This way of casting Einstein
Yes.
through Gaussian metric.
Yes.
Asking when you say this equation now become Weyl-Post solution. But you could argue just by writing actual metric G mu equals to eta mu plus h mu, where h mu is not small.
Okay.
Later we'll make assumption h mu. Then you can massage and you can write box operator or etc. And then right hand side whatever it will be function of h square, h q, etc. That equations won't be Weyl-Post for.
Well, yes, but the field equation GR has been found by mathematicians to be a well-posed problem because there exists a coordinate system in which it is well-posed. Now, once you have the solution in that coordinate system, you can apply a coordinate transformation and show that GR will be a well-posed system of equations in any coordinate system. So the mathematician proved this theorem by proving that there is indeed a complete solution in a particular coordinate system. Okay.
Why did you define Gaussian? Why did you?
Because the Gothic metric is the basic object that we use for in perturbations, because it obeys a very simple gauge condition. Yes, that's all. Yeah. Okay. And because also I am going to define the Fokker action now from that action. So also I have done that because I think this is interesting by itself. And also in practical calculation of the post-Newtonian equations of motion, we define the action using this formalism completely. When we want to obtain the equations of motion at, say, 4p n order, this is exactly the formalism that we use. We use the Einstein-Hilbert action in that form, or rather expressed in terms of that perturbation of the Gothic metric with respect to the Minkowski metric, and we do all our calculation at very high order in that form. Okay. Yes? This is because it's a letter used in the German literature that this is a German letter. The Germans before the war were using all the time Gothic alphabet. And so the German people, maybe Einstein himself, used this Gothic alphabet, and so that's the tradition that we keep. This is the Gothic G. So so there is a tradition to call it the Gothic metric. Okay, so let me define now the Fokker action of n particles. So we defined our system of n particles already yesterday. So let me remind you that the matter action will be a sum of the particle. So you will have minus ma, the mass of the particle, and the integral of the proper time of each of the particles. And so I will have my particles AB, the position in space-time. There will be a 4-velocity UA mu for each of the particles. And the 4-velocity is just the derivative with respect to proper time, and proper time is defined by the metric at point A. Now you have computed yesterday the stress energy tensor of these particles moving in some arbitrary metric g mu nu. And this is given by the integral over proper time of UA nu, and there is a 4-dimensional Dirac function, delta function. And if you split the 4-dimensional delta function into a 3-dimensional one plus an ordinary delta function on the time component of your position, then you have a 3-dimensional form for the stress energy tensor, which is given by VA nu over the proper time divided by the ordinary coordinate time, and the expression is written in terms of the ordinary velocity of your particles times a 3-dimensional delta function divided by square root of minus g. So I use 3-dimensional variables. The position of each of the particles will be just, the time component will be just t. It comes from the split of that delta function into a 3-dimensional one. So you will have the ordinary position, which depends on time t, and I define the the ordinary velocity to be the time derivative of the ordinary position. Okay, so we have this expression of the stress energy tensor, and we have the Einstein field equations, and we can solve the field equations given the stress energy tensor of the particles. So, in that way, we shall, in solving we shall obtain a solution which will be the metric or the gravitational field variable h mu nu, which will be given by an explicit solution which will depend on the variables of the particles, the positions and velocities of the particles. So this solution will depend on the positions, velocities, and in general, accelerations of the particles. And this will be an explicit solution, and I will write this is a particular solution with this h bar, meaning that I have solved the Einstein field equations, say by a post-Newtonian iteration of the field equation. We shall see later how to do it in practice. And in some iterative process, so it will be some iterative Pn solution of the field equations. So I add my gauge fixed action, I derive the field equation, and then I solve them by means of, say, a post-Newtonian iteration. And now the Fokker action will be obtained when we replace back this explicit solution into the original action. We have our gauge fixed action, which will be an integral d4x of some Lagrange density depending on h and the derivative of h, okay, plus the matter action, which is given in this form. So which is given as the sum over the particle, integral over dt, where I am using my three-dimensional notation, the metric at the location of the particle, and the ordinary velocity of the particle. And the Fokker action will be obtained when we replace in that action the metric by this explicit solution depending on the particles. So we shall get an action which depends only on the particle variables, which will be the position, the velocities, maybe the acceleration as well of the particles. So this will be an action only for the particles, for the system of n particles, which will be given by this Lagrange density, but now computed with this explicit solution h bar mu nu, which is given there. So it will depend on x, and then your particles, and the matter action will also be obtained as a sum over the particles, and now the metric will be given by this explicit metric computed at point B but depending also on the particles A through this explicit solution of the Einstein field equations. So YA, VA, and so on. times VB new. And this is the Fokker action. The equations of motion will be obtained by varying this Fokker action with respect to the particles. I will vary with respect to some position of one of the particles. And when I vary with respect to the particle, there will be two types of terms. There are the terms which come from the variation of the matter action with respect to the position and velocity of the particle B. And there are the terms which come from the variation of the position that appear through this explicit solution which is here. So there will be the variation of the matter action with respect to the position that are here and computed for the metric G bar, and where I have varied with respect to this position and the velocities that are here. And there will be also the variation of the total action, which comes from the variation of the metric solution here with respect to the particles, and the variation with respect here to the metric. And the variation should be computed for the particular metric which is here. Okay? And the point is now that since this is a solution of the Einstein field equation, then the variation of the Einstein-Hilbert action for that solution is 0. So this is equal 0 because G bar is solution of the Einstein field equations. So you end up with the fact that your Fokker action, the variation of your Fokker action with respect to the particles, is given just simply by the variation of the matter action with respect to the particles, but computed with that solution of the field equation which is generated by the particle itself. So the Fokker action permits to describe a self-gravitating system of particles. The equations of motion describe a self-gravitating system of n particles where each of the particles moves in the metric that is generated by the system of particles itself. Okay? It's a different situation from the situation we had yesterday, where we had considered the matter action and varied the matter action in a fixed background. Yes? Yes? I don't understand. So I have this first term comes from the variation of. Yes? So sorry. So this is for A is equal to 1 n. It depends on all the particles, and in addition, there is a sum of the particle B. don't.
So I was saying that, suppose if I want to find the equation of motion for ith particle,
For
some nth particle,
some particles.
yeah, nth particle. Suppose you, okay. So you have a system of
N.
capital N particle,
Okay.
and suppose I want to find equation of motion for some random ith particle.
Why random? For one of the particles.
Just one
Okay.
of the
Okay. So this is my particle A. I want the action, the equations of motion of particle A. So I vary the action with respect to this particular particle. Okay. So I will have a variation due to this sum. When this sum involves A, then I will have to vary. But also the A will be also in that solution, which depends on all the particles, and in particular on that particle A. So I have to vary also that dependence on the metric on that particular particle A.
How the second term vanish, I mean, equates to, can be equated to 0 in the equation of motion. This is in Fokker space.
So you mean this term which is 0?
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
this term is 0 because you have constructed a solution of the Einstein field equations. And as you know, the solution is exactly an extremum of the action. This is the principle.
But it is where it's a function of G bar, and this is varying. Why this is varying with G instead of G bar?
No, because the variation of the action with respect to the metric is to be then computed for that particular metric G bar or H bar. Okay? So the action depends on the metric, here G bar. So I vary with respect to the metric, and then I vary the metric G bar with respect to the positions. So this is just usual composition of derivations. So you know the chain rule for differentiations or variations. The ordinary chain rule for that. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I have been a little bit simple here. I did not explain it, but I will now tell you exactly how this is done in practice. Okay. Any other question? Okay, so we shall do now a practical calculation of the equations of motion in the PN approximation. So we shall consider the PN approximation. So we shall have a matter source which is isolated with compact support. And size A, mass M, which is post-Newtonian, that is slowly moving. That is, there will be a small parameter, which is of the order of the typical internal velocities in your source, which will be much less than 1. And the source will be self-gravitating. By which I mean that internal motions is due to gravitational forces. That is a typical acceleration in my source, which will be v squared over a, which is of the order of gm over a squared. Yes? Oh yes, okay. So there is a finite size A. So the period, typical period of motion in the source will be P, which will be 2 pi A over typical velocity. And the gravitational wave length, since the gravitational wave will be generated by the internal motion of the source, the wavelength will be given by c times the period. So this implies that the ratio between the size of the source and the gravitational wavelength is of the order of V over C, which is our small parameter epsilon. And for here, I define rather the reduced wavelength, lambda bar, which is lambda over 2 pi. So a post-Newtonian source, so it will be our binary systems. There will be a typical size of my source. Typical motion will be very small with respect to velocity of light. And I will define, and I will have the size of the source, which will be much smaller than the wavelength of the gravitational waves. So I will have the gravitational waves, which is produced by the motion of my source. And I will have my gravitational wavelength much larger than the size of the source, and therefore I can define a so-called near zone which will be a region in which R, the distance to the center of mass of my source, will be much smaller than the wavelength. And I can always choose the near zone to overlap the system. So for Pn sources are always smaller, inside, enclosed by the near zone. And the near zone will be the zone in which the post-Newtonian approximation will be valid. And I can define also the wave zone for which R is, say, much larger than the wavelength of the gravitational wave. So in the near zone, I will make an expansion when epsilon stands to 0. And I can write the Einstein field equations in the form that written before and expand it when epsilon tends to 0. So we had our Einstein field equations that are given by 16 pi g over C4 I reintroduce now the G's and the C's. And I have my nonlinear term, which is of order h squared at least. And the stress energy tensor of my particles remind the general expression of the stress energy tensor, which is here, and in which one should put back the relevant C's in order to perform the epsilon very small expansion, which is equivalent to an expansion when C formally tends to infinity. And the T00 component of my matter stress energy tensor will be of the order of, say, the density of the source, which would be of order C squared. T0I will be rho C VI, which will be of order C, and TIG will be of the order of rho VI VJ, which will be of order 1 when C tends to infinity, or when epsilon tends to 0. And I am defining here for my system of particles the density to be just the Newtonian density of the particles with ordinary delta functions. This is just a simple consequence of the stress energy tensor that we have here. So, in the first approximation to leading order, I will have to solve these equations. To leading order, I can neglect these terms that are of higher order, quadratic in H, and to first approximation, I can replace the D'Alembertian operator by a Laplacian operator. So I will have D'Alembertian, which will be the Laplacian operator minus 1 over C squared, the term due to the retardation of gravitational wave, and the retardation of gravitational wave can be neglected or are very small in the Dirac zone, as you see explicitly here, where the gravitational wave is essentially constant all over the near zone. So this will be the Laplacian plus small terms when in the approximation of order 1 over C squared, as is explicit here in this factor. So to leading order, I will have to solve Laplacian of H naught naught, which will be given by 16 pi G over C squared rho, which comes from the matter part here, and I can neglect higher order terms that are at least of order 1 over C4, since they are quadratic in H, which is itself of order 1 over C squared. The 0I component will be given by this quantity, but at that order, it will be of order 1 over C3, and in the leading approximation, I will neglect them. 1 over C3, smaller than that, and similarly, the space component of my metric will be of order 1 over C4, that I neglect them in the leading approximation. So, in the leading approximation, which will be just the Newtonian approximation. I will introduce the Newtonian potential obeying the ordinary Poisson equation. So this will be the Poisson potential given by the Poisson integral of the density in the source. My metric will be simple H00, which will be given by just the Poisson integral multiplied by minus 4u over c square plus O of 1 over c4. And at Newtonian order, that's the only component of the field that is relevant. Component 0, I, and Ig are for the moment negligible. And I will apply that to my system of, say, two particles. So I will have particle 1, particle 2, and I will have some field point x, okay? And I will denote R1, the distance between x and y1, R2 here, and R1 to here. And I can denote also unit vector n1 here in this way, and so on. So my Newtonian potential is just given by the ordinary expression for the Newtonian potential. So it will be just G m1 over R1 plus 1 gives 2. So we have the complete solution at Newtonian order. And as I said, in order to obtain the Fokker action, I have to replace that explicit solution. And so I will put a bar here to say that this is my explicit solution. You have seen the practical way to compute it, okay? And I have to replace that in the Fokker action. Now the Fokker action, there is a Lagrange density for that, which is minus C4 over 64 pi g. And I have many of these terms. I have shown all them for you together on the previously. And so I have to replace that, taking into account the fact that h naught dot is 1 over c square, and the other one, 1 over c3, 1 over c4. And it remains only two terms that depend excuse me, U is a Newtonian potential. Yeah. Yeah. And I have this relation, okay? And there will be also a term which comes from the trace of H, where H is a trace which will be minus H naught naught plus HII. Okay? You remember works on the trace reversed variables that exactly are the same, but here actually this is H naught naught plus O of 1 over C4, where I use this expression. And so I will be at leading order, this will be 1 over C4, C2, 1 over C2, so 1 over C4, so this will be Newtonian, and then I will neglect the 1 over C square terms. And so what you end up is that this is given by minus 1 over 8 pi g du g iu square plus higher order terms. This is for the gravitational part of the Fokker action. But we have also to take into account the matter part. And the matter part, so the Lagrangian associated with that will be minus the sum of the particles, so there will be the contribution of the first particles, And so this will be M1C square root of the metric my G mu nu bar evaluated at point 1 V1 mu V1 nu plus for the other particle. And when you plug the metric as given by that explicit solution, you get that it is minus M1, and there will be the rest mass term, and then there will be a contribution due to this factor, which gives you, which depend on the velocity and the position and the potential, Newtonian potential at the position of your particle, plus 1 gives 2. So the Fokker action will be given by this term, minus 8 pi over g integral d3x of giu plus this term. This is given by that. No, the sign is correct. The Poisson integral will involve minus 1 over 4 pi. So this is plus gm over r. Yeah. So we have the Fokker action, and so we see that there is a term which comes from the matter action, and this term, to this term, is to be crucially added a term coming from the gravitational part, the Einstein-Hilbert part of the action, and which is an integral over all space of the metric solution of our field equations, obtained by post-Newtonian iterations. And to handle this term, we perform an integration by parts. For instance, there are many ways to compute this term, which will be given by u Laplace u, and this will be given by 4 pi g, where I use the solution, the source of the Poisson equation here, u times m1 delta, which is my rho, plus 1 gives 2. And so this is given by 4 pi g m1 multiplied by the position, the Newtonian potential at position 1, plus m2, the Newtonian potential evaluated at position 2. And so finally, we get the final expression for the Fokker-Lagrangian, which will be the expression plus O of 1 over c square. Plus the contribution coming from the other particles. Actually, let me rewrite it in a way that you can see that indeed the Newtonian approximation is correct. Well, now we need something which is absolutely crucial, is that we need a regularization. Need a regularization. Indeed, we have to define what is the Newtonian potential evaluated at point 1, and the Newtonian potential is G1 M1 over R1 plus G M2 over R2, evaluated when X tends to Y1. And you see the first term is 0. When X tends to Y1, R1 tends to 0, and you need a regularization. So let me just show you a very simple regularization, which is known as the Hadamard regularization. When you have a function which depends on 2 points y1 and y2 at which that are singular points. That is, if you have a function f of x which admits 2 singular points and which admits an expansion in powers of the distance to the singular point, say when x tends to y1. So there will be some powers p, and then some coefficients which depends on the direction of approach to the singularity. N1. So it will be an expansion for p larger than, say, some p naught. So it's a singular expansion when R1 tends to 0. The Hadamard regularization of the function at the point 1, where it is singular, is given by definition, so it's a definition, by the coefficient of the zeroth power of R1, but that coefficient depends on the unit vector n1, the direction at which you approach the singularity, and the Hadamard regularization consists in averaging over angles that coefficient. This Hadamard regularization is used in Pn approximation up to 2Pn order, and actually gives you very good results, the complete correct result up to 2Pn order. But this regularization gives you as problems at higher order, 3Pn and higher order, that are related to the fact that, which is evident from that definition, to the fact that the product of 2 singular functions, the regularization of the product of 2 singular functions is in general different from the product of the regularization. So, Hadamard regularization will be used only up to 2Pn order, and at the higher order, I will tell you what is the correct regularization to be used. But anyway, when you apply this regularization to the computation of the Newtonian potential, you see that the divergent term is just 1 over R1, and there is no finite part coefficient in the expansion, so this is immediately 0. And so what you get is that this is just given by GM2, R2 computed when x tends to y1, that is R12. And now you recognize the correct Lagrangian at Newtonian order, which will be minus m1 c square minus m2 c square, plus the ordinary kinetic term for the two particles. And there is the gravitational term, which is Gm1, M2, divided by R12. It is given by that contribution, but there is also the other contribution, so this is just a factor 1 in front, plus terms of order 1 over c square. And this is the correct Lagrangian for the motion of two particles in the Newtonian approximation. You will note that the potential term, gravitational potential term, which is correct here, has a factor 1. If you don't include that crucial term in the derivation, the factor here will be wrong. The kinetic term will be okay, but the potential term will be wrong. You will get a factor 2 here, which is wrong. So this is a crucial difference between the motion of particles in a fixed background and the motion of the particle in the field generated by the other particle, that is the self-gravitating problem. So we shall discuss more powerful regularizations the next time, but I'd like now to extend that calculation to the next 1pn order in order to obtain the motion at the 1pn order. So we have to consider the 1pn approximation. And we use, again, harmonic coordinates. D nu h mu nu is equal to 0. And as it turns out, is that in this coordinate system, the 1pn approximation is parameterized by only two potentials, a scalar potential V, which will be the generalization of the Poisson potential, and a vector potential VI. And the metric at the 1pn approximation will be given by its component. So the metric will start with the Minkowski term plus 2v over c square minus 2v square over c4. And now, consistently with the 1pn approximation, I am neglecting terms of order 1 over c6 in the g0 component of the metric. And I will have the G0I term, which will be given by this vector potential, which will describe gravitomagnetic terms in the expansion, which arise at the 1pn approximation, as you may know from previous courses. And finally, the space-space metric in these coordinates will be given by 1 over 2v over c square plus orders, neglected orders, 1 over c4. And this is just a parameterization of the metric, and you have to specify what are the equation satisfied by these vector and scalar potential that should be equivalent to the Einstein field equation developed up to 1p order. And these are very simple. These are just two wave equation. So this is the Einstein field equation at 1p order in very simple form. The D'Alembertian of V is minus 4 pi g, exactly like for the Poisson potential, but time a source density sigma. And the D'Alembertian of Vi is given by minus 4 pi g, some sigma I. And we just have to relate these scalar and vector source to the stress energy tensor of your matter system. And sigma is just T naught naught, but you have to add the special trace of the stress energy tensor to get everything correct. And the sigma I is just T, the T0I component of your stress energy tensor. Notice that since the gravitomagnetic potential, vector potential, appears only at 1p order, it is sufficient actually to compute that equation at the Newtonian order, that is to replace this box operator by the Laplace operator just at the leading order, and just to consider the leading order in the expression of this component T0I. But on the other hand, relativistic correction to the component T00 of the matter tensor are crucial, and also this component which appears exactly at the 1p order. So this is a very simple, yes? Yes, exactly. So this is valid, yes, it's a good remark. This is valid for a general matter source, and the TII will be essentially three times the pressure, 3p, absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't think so. This is a gravitational field generated by pressure in your matter source. I think that, yeah. Yes? Yes. So this is 1pn. Here you have the Newtonian term. Here you have 1pn. Here you have 1pn. And here you have 1pn. In the metric, you know, you have ds square, the interval, which is g00 c square dt square plus the other. So there is a c square, which is here, which is why you have to push the expansion up to 1/c6. Okay. So how much time do I have? I think it's almost finished. Okay, so I think it's better to stop and to take some questions at this point. I will continue tomorrow.